You're listening to the Believe in Giants podcast with two-time Super Bowl winner Carl Banks and the voice of the Giants, Bob Papa.
Welcome to another edition of Believe in Giants. Bob Papa, two-time Super Bowl champion Carl Banks. Giants into the offseason. Training camp starts in, let's face it, a month. The countdown is already on. It goes fast, especially as you get older. It used to seem like forever that when the spring ended and the training camp started was forever, but it'll be here before you know it with rookies reporting. But Carl, last week at Madison Square Garden, you got the logo on 100. It was a night to remember, not only for Giants fans and Giants people, owners, and everything else. It was a night to remember for you guys, wasn't it?
Yeah, Bob, it was such an incredible night. And you just realize when you sit in the room with the guys from not only the guys I played with, but the Michael Strahans, the Tucks, the Tikis, the Seahorns, the Brian Kellys, you realize just how special being a Giants football player is all about. You realize how special the organization is and what winning in New York is all about. And, you had this, you did a great job of taking everybody on this journey of how the foundation was built. There were foundational players that just kind of bridged into when I started, that bridged into the next era of Super Bowl champions. And I just think it's just incredible because when you listen to how Brian Kelly and Pete Gogolak and Harry Carson talked about Giants fans and how they define the fans and what the fans came to appreciate and what their expectations were and how they aligned with the owner, Wellington Mara's views on how fans should be treated, how the game should be played for the fans. It was just amazing.
Yeah, and even to have the Robustelli family and the Gifford family there was, it's just connecting all of these dots. When the show started and was on the stage with John Mara, and he was talking about the history and the acknowledgement and the thanking of the Tisch family once they became partners as far as business is concerned, everything. And then I had Peter Schrager out there with O'Hara, and Pete Gogolak comes out, and I remember him as a 10-year-old kid, and the teams were so bad back then. But I mean, I said, wow, we're in for a special evening. I'm thinking of this because he was killing it. I'm like, damn, Pete Gogolak's stealing the show. He's cracking jokes at 83. He's making fun. He's all these things that he was talking about and I was like, oh boy, we are in for some evening.
Yeah, the storytelling, folks, if you weren't in attendance, and you cannot miss the re-airing of this. It is just great. And it'll make you feel so great about being a Giants fan. Whatever you're going through right now as a fan, you will appreciate your fandom for this organization because not every organization has 4 Super Bowl champions. Not every organization, we're all built the same. And, we are pre-free agency era when this thing first started. So it is just beautiful, man.
I want to mention this Thursday night. What is Thursday night? The 27th. 27th of June on MSG at 7 p.m. There's going to be a 1 hour, edited down. The show ran 2.5 hours. There's going to be a 1 hour edited down version of the show. However, you can go to the Giants YouTube channel, Giants TV, and Giants.com, and each segment is going to air in its entirety. So the Parcells Coughlin segment will air. Then the Parcells, Sims, Eli, Carson, Strahan, LT segment will air in its entirety. Then the Brian Kelly and George Martin segment, and then your segment with Bavaro and McConkey and Joe Morris and Otis Anderson will air in its entirety. So everything will air. So you'll be able to see it in its entirety, but it'll be in segments. But that will live on Giants.com and the Giants YouTube channel. You know, I was talking to Coach Parcells on Sunday, kind of randomly called me. And he wanted, you know, like everybody else, how do you think it went? And I said, Coach, I said, I've done 10 Olympics. I've called Super Bowls. I've done heavyweight championship fights. I've done the Masters. I've done a lot of things in my career, including being the voice of the New York Football Giants. I said, from a professional standpoint, it might have been one of the most special gigs that I've ever done in my life. And he got a little choked up on the phone, and he's like, that's awesome to hear. He goes, you know, he goes, I don't know if we're ever going to have that collection of people together on a stage again. He goes, we're all getting older and things happen. So he really soaked in the moment. And I was talking with Coach Coughlin as well. And, you know, it was a night that was almost, as Parcells said to me, he said, Bob, I want to tell you something. There was a lot of love on that stage.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
A lot of love. You know, even the VIP cocktail thing in the Chase Lounge, you know, oh my gosh, everybody was just, it was like a high school reunion.
Yeah.
For people that didn't even play in the same eras.
Yeah. And speaking of that, two observations. So Bobby Okereke and Kayvon Thibodeau were there. And so Okereke is just hanging out with Parcells. And I mean, he's soaking it all in. And then Harry moseys over and they're striking up this three-way conversation. And it's all ball, right? And Bobby is such a sponge and is such a student of the game, but he understood the magnitude of who he was standing with, Harry and Bill. And then I look in the far corner, by themselves is Lawrence and Kayvon Thibodeau. And it was, you know, I happened to go over there and bust it up a little bit, but it was something to see those young players intellectually curious and just they took it all in, and you could just tell because every guy had a story to tell. And you know, from passing into their auditorium, Bobby Okereke says to me, so what's the secret sauce? He's like, what's the secret sauce? And, you know, I went on to tell him how every single player on our team, and it would go the same for Strahan's era, we all helped each other get better. I said, there was no, if our weakest link, if we didn't help our weakest link, then we all failed. Shame on us for allowing a player to be a bad player if we have the opportunity to help them. And we can get into that a little bit later. And then there was Kayvon Thibodeau. So what's your superpower? What was your superpower, right? And just talking about how to watch film and how to evaluate and how you go about your process. So it was just so special, man. And then, you know, I'd be remiss because the guy who was my ultimate bridge was George Martin. He was with the Giants 10 years before I got there. right? And then stayed another 6 or 7. So, but between George and Harry, really articulating the fan importance meant a lot. And I think that was kind of the foundation of how we approached every game, win, lose, or draw.
Yeah, I mean, they referenced that was a funny moment there where Harry was talking about taking flying lessons, and like Brian Kelly was like, to fly the plane over the stadium. Things were so bad. the camaraderie is so good. And then, the newer generation came up, and, it was really cool too. Like with Brian Kelly, he was with the Giants when Emlyn Tennell it was his last year as D-backs coach.
Wow.
And a lot of these guys, Rosie Brown, who's arguably the greatest left tackle in the history of the sport, and Emlyn Tennell, one of the great DBs in the history of the sport, not just Giants history, the history of the sport. And Andy Robustelli is the team president, and Brian Kelly, like, being able to bridge this gap, and Harry and George having had a chance to interact with these legendary players, and then pass that message forward to your new group as you guys came in, and then you guys passed it forward to the next group with Strahan. It was pretty intense, because people forget too with Strahan, he was on the 93 Giants. So he actually played with Phil Simms and Lawrence Taylor.
Yeah.
Which, so there's all these things that you pick up along the way that I found absolutely extraordinary. And, it was one of these nights where, listen, with Giants fans and roster moves and drafting quarterbacks, not drafting quarterbacks, who's playing right tackle, who's not, and a lot of negativity in these chat things with the Giants. This is like the first Giants related thing that not one person has said anything bad about. That was there. That was a part of it. The run out to it. Everything from the way the lobby was decorated. Did you have a chance to tour that and see all that?
I did. It was incredible. Absolutely. It was a great fan experience, just outlining the legacy of the team. And I just think it was, just something for everybody to be proud of, because the team did it right. The presentation from start to finish was just incredible.
Yeah, and having Chaz Palminteri voice the...
Oh, can I tell you that story?
Yeah. So there's a history of the Giants video that ran to kind of kick off the night. And Chaz Palminteri not only voiced it, but he was in it telling the story of the franchise. Go ahead, tell your story.
So I'm back in the VIP, and I'm sitting in the corner trying to cool off, and I see Chaz Palminteri. And, you don't assume anything. And I look, I'm like, I got to go over and get a picture with Chaz. I got to ask him. So I go to introduce myself, and he said, Carl Banks, you don't need to introduce yourself. You asked my nephew right here. I was telling my nephew, you, Harry, and Lawrence Taylor were three bad motherfuckers. And he started laughing, and he's like, I'd be honored to take a picture with you. I'm like, man, Chaz Palminteri is like a huge hardcore Giants fan, man. And then I didn't get a chance to meet Jason Biggs, but it was just to see guys like that, of that stature, who's really connected beyond just being a fan, right? They are real hardcore fans. They know their players, and it's not just, hey, I'm a Giants fan and I remember what, but it was just like, it was a moment for me.
Yeah, and it was pretty cool having my parents there, because they grew up in the shadow of that stadium right behind me. Yeah. And my grandmother's cousin was on the grounds crew for years, 40 years, whatever it was. So my dad and my uncle, in order to get into the games for free, over the left field wall there in the bullpen, that's where they would bring the handicapped people in wheelchairs. Mm-hmm. So my dad and my uncle would wheel people in the wheelchairs, and they had them out in the, along the sideline out there. And that was his job, but that was his free ticket to get into Giant games. So like, my dad was there when Summerall kicked the famous field goal, like right under the goalpost in the snow. So to have them there was like pretty neat. And it was just we could have gone on, as Coach Coughlin said to me, the Parcells segment with Coach Coughlin and just Phil, Eli, Strahan, LT, and Harry. That could have been an entire show.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
absolutely. Absolutely. It was just great, man. And then, with Phil and Coach Coughlin, they got into part of that segment when they were just talking about how and how Bill and Phil interacted, and they talked about how hard football is. They gave that when you guys see that segment on the Giants or the MSG part. I hope they air it on MSG. They just got into just not only just playing football, but winning football is hard. And there it takes a special type of team and special type of players to really accomplish it, and the chemistry that it takes, because it's always a delicate balance, Bob. And I just I feel so bad in a way for current players, because they're not just on the Giants, but throughout the league, because the league is so transient right now that sometimes you don't get those foundational players around the organization enough to get your really good players to understand what their role should be in elevating the rest of the team. And, I had that opportunity, and Strahan had it. And to be honest with you, and he wasn't there that night, but Leonard Marshall was a key cog too, because he was a year before me, but he was the step that I needed. He was the shoulders that I had to kind of ride on to kind of understand the lay of the land and how this thing works, because Leonard was a sponge as well. Like he kind of went into the history of the NFL. And so it's all a thing where if you can get your very good players to understand their role beyond just being a good player for your team, but having a role in helping develop your teammates, beyond just the leadership and the rah-rah, it's important. And so many players now are not around long enough or don't understand what's expected of them outside of getting their numbers. And it's not a rah-rah thing. It's and I don't even know if the rules would allow it, but you've got to be able to help your teammates. If you got a starter on your team and you're a good player on the other side of the ball, if you're not helping him get better, then you're failing your team and you're helping your team fail.
How did you do it? How was it done for you, and how did you do it as we're talking about these generations spanning?
Well, there's a guy named Mark Bavaro who both of us relied on each other to get ourselves ready for anything that could possibly happen, right? And Jumbo Elliott will tell you this story. Doug Riesenberg will tell you the story. If a guy needed help and he was a starter, we were the first in line. It wasn't so. If let's just say if it was a Doug Riesenberg or a Jumbo Elliott, and there are one-on-one situations, right? One-on-one drills are the closest you get to game action, game speed. His first 4 draws would be Lawrence, myself, Leonard, and probably Andy Hetton or Pepper Johnson when he was there. He didn't get off reps. So every rep he took was against a very good player until we got them ready. And the same with Jumbo Elliott, Doug Riesenberg. From my standpoint, I had Mark Bavaro, but the guy who was the ultimate teammate was Otis Anderson, because Otis Anderson would look at other teams' offenses, and he'd come to you, he'd come to me, he'd come to Pepper. Hey, Banksy, Pep, I want to work with you guys. When we get in one-on-one drills, I want to give you guys the looks. I'm going to get Meggett to come and give you guys a look too, because if you guys can cover us, you're not going to have a problem with Stump Mitchell. You're not going to have a problem with whoever that guy is if we are in passing situations. So in one-on-one drills, we drew the best of our teammates to get us ready. So it wasn't, okay, I'm going to get a free agent here, so I'm going to win on this play. Like Otis was Otis was great at it. And then he'd pull you after practice. If you didn't have a good drill, he'd pull you after practice and he'd get his other running backs to give you those simulations. So that is what I say when you have players who need to get better or need to get up to speed on something, your best players' responsibilities, your really good players, it's their responsibility to get those guys ready, as well as it is for the player who has to get ready to be willing to go through that fire. And so I guess I say that because I had a conversation with Justin Tuck. And Justin Tuck, we were at a Rangers game this year, and he said, if we had a bad player on our team, it would be our responsibility to show the coaches that they need to change this guy. Either that or the guy's going to get better, because we're going to line our best players up on him in drills, and we're going to make him show what he has, right? And that is something that can be simulated today, but it's like everybody wants to limit their reps against who they go against. I'm saying right now, Kayvon Thibodeau, Brian Burns, you're failing your team if you don't help these offensive tackles get better. In particular, Evan Neal. We need to find out if Evan Neal really wants this. And the only way you're going to find that out is not putting some free agent or some training camp body on him in one-on-one drills and he only sees one good pass rusher for the entire drill. Every rep he gets, it should be Ojulari, it should be Brian Burns, it should be Kayvon Thibodeau. The drills ain't that long and he ain't going to get but 4 or 5 reps, but that is as close as you're going to get to game speed. And any drill you do in practice, everything else is controlled. But those one-on-one drills, he needs to see those guys. And if those guys aren't standing in line to go against him, you're not helping your team. And I don't care what the coaches say, because we've had coaches say, no, we only need one of you guys. We're like, no, he needs all 4 of us, right? If it's Mark Bavaro in pass routes, right? Mike Pope would say Andy Haddon, go guard him. Andy Haddon was our best cover linebacker. He'd say, you got him in one-on-one drills. And then Belichick would put me in versus him or Zeke Moat, because Zeke was a great pass route runner. So I would have to get the best route runner, Bavaro would have to get the best coverage guy. And that was your drill. And then you went from tight ends to backs. And then that's when Otis and David and all those other guys that were real, and Tony Galbraith, right?
Uh-huh.
These guys were great route runners, but they did not sit in the back of the line saying it's a break, it's the offense's drill. They're like, Banksy, we got to get your guys ready, right? And so depending on what the week was, but especially in training camp, they would line up 1, 2, 3, 4. If it was 4 really good route runners, they line up, and every time I came up, one of those guys were there. Every time Lawrence came up, one of those guys were there. So it wasn't like we're looking around to see if we could get some camp body to get a win. It wasn't about us getting the win. It was about us getting better and our teammates helping us. And again, this is, I get really, emotional about the connection of our teammates and just what it meant to be champions, because after every drill, Otis Anderson would pull you aside, or when the break and you're drinking water, he's going to say, Banksy, you did X, Y, and Z, and that's why I was able to get da-da-da-da. I mean, it was just that type of camaraderie. Or after pass rush drills, you'd see Lawrence and Jumbo having a conversation, or Lawrence and Doug Riesenberg, or Leonard and Doug Riesenberg having conversations about that drill and what they did to beat those guys. And, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just thinking, and that we could talk about. I mean, I understand collective bargaining agreements and everything, but I think that's where in the game today, with no 2-a-days and, a lot more stuff in shells and stuff like that, I think that's where your player development has got to be harder when you have question marks. because you
Well,
don't have as many reps. And that's why I think these teams really enjoy these joint practices with these
sure.
other teams, because when I watch joint practices, and you and I were in Detroit last year, to me, watching the joint practices reminded me of what training camp looked like pre the most recent CBA.
Sure. Sure.
That's only 2 or 3 days. You know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
a different world.
It's a different world, but you still have your opportunities, but that's not up to coaches. That's up to players. Again, there are some drills that have to simulate some type of game speed, and those are the one-on-one drills. The same with the wide receivers and the DBs on this team, right? Deontay Banks has now got a very diverse group of wide receivers, and if they're in one-on-one drills, he should want to go against every one of those guys. All their top 4 or 5 receivers, he needs to go against every one of them so that in game situations, he'll be able to take short area distance receivers like a Wan'Dale Robinson, right? Because he's got short area quickness and speed. Guy with straight line speed like a Hyatt or a Darius Slayton. And then you got the complete package with Malik Neighbor. So these are things that, as players, you got to say going into camp, these are the guys I want to practice against every chance I get, right? Not just that one moment where it's, in the one-on-one drill, there was one rep where Neighbors and Deontay Banks were going against each other. It should be a murderer's row of your best players against you. Whoever fits what you need to do, and it's not a success or fail thing, because you're just going to get better. Iron sharpens iron, and you got to be able to have those types of moments. And if you don't, as leaders or as your very good players on the team, you're letting everybody else down. It's a job and everybody has their own responsibility, but winning is also a job, and it's not easy. And the only way you get to be a winning or a championship caliber team means you're getting everybody on your team better with your skill set.
I want to just take a moment here for fans out there. BetOnline is your #1 source for all your sports betting needs: baseball, golf, soccer, top fights, UFC, MMA, boxing, stats, every matchup, even live odds, spreads. While the games are being played, head to the website today and get in on the action. Use the promo code BELIEVE for your 50% off. BetOnline, the game starts here. You talked about all that stuff. And we get back into from the historical standpoint, and I think fans are going to love this because there's a thread in this. The Hard Knocks debuts on July the 2nd, and we got a little taste of one of the episodes. The trailer was released yesterday. Obviously, it's going to be pretty interesting. Hard Knocks offseason with the New York Giants. But then starting on July the 9th, we're going to have this countdown to the top 100 players in the history of the franchise. Now, I was asked to be the chairperson of an independent blue ribbon panel made up of beat writers, retired beat writers, veteran NFL writers, Hall of Fame voters, league historians, and also someone that works for the Hall of Fame, as well as 2 super fans. And 5,000 guys have worn a Giants uniform, and we have whittled it down through a voting process of the top 100. So starting on July the 9th, we're going to start revealing 10 at a time. Excuse me. But in conjunction with the release of 10 names, starting at number 100 and working our way to number 1, we have podcasts that are tied to each release of the 10 names with 2 players that are in that numerical part of the list. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of interesting because we were able to, again, spot 2 different eras of generations. And what you've just talked about, and I don't want to give away any of the podcasts and any of the names because I don't want to reveal guys that are in the the top 100, but it is really interesting because you hear players from the different eras talking about, because we got two guys from two eras talking about play, and they're what you're talking about, that making this one better, watching what you did and seeing and understanding the tradition and upholding, like it's all thread throughout the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it also is important when you have coaching that feel the same way, right? Like there's, I probably to a person, if you were a very good player under Bill Parcells or Coughlin and his assistant coaches, there would be at some point that coach is going to say, I need to find out about this fucking guy. I need to know if he can play. So I need you to really go at him. And he get a group of guys. I mean, that's just how you get your players battle tested and ready. And we knew what that meant. It didn't mean go destroy a guy, but you give him your best looks so that they could get better. And coaches, and this is where I am with Evan Neal now. We need to find out if you can play, right? You looked the part and you've had injuries. Now it's time to find out. And your teammates cannot let you kind of skate through it, because if they do, then that's what it's going to look like in the game. So that the responsibility of your really good players to the rest of the team goes beyond their performance. It goes beyond their stats. When you want to be a championship team, you get everybody ready. You get everybody battle tested. You take care of each other. You're not going to abuse each other, but you want to make sure that you give these players your best looks, and it's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, we're gonna do something during the course of the season on like assistant coaches, right? Like if you think about it, first of all, here's a great bar trivia question. The Giants have won 4 Super Bowls, right? There's only 2 people whose names are on all 4 trophies. And I think George Martin kind of ended the show awesome when I could see he was making eye contact with me, but he couldn't say anything. And as we were kind of getting ready to wrap up, he kind of took the mic and interjected himself because he wasn't part of that con.
Sure.
And for him to point out Ronnie Barnes, the director of medical services and the head trainer for the Giants, I thought that was a very cool moment.
It was. And again, Ronnie is just as important. He has been just as important to these championships as the players, because he and his staff have been tremendous in the physical therapy and the mental therapy in some cases with guys. I can't say enough great things about him. He is the best in class.
So his name is on all 4 trophies. You know who else's name is on all 4 trophies?
Who?
Mike Pope, one of the great tight end coaches.
Best in the business.
Not in Giants history, in NFL history.
Best in the business.
And we're going to do some things during the course of the season on the Giants media platforms. But if you think about assistants, Lombardi and Landry, wow, that's pretty good assistants. Bill Belichick, wow, greatest coach of all time. Then you got Spags, you got Pope, you have Gilbride, you have Ron Earhart, Mike Sweatman was a part of, I think, 3 of the Super Bowl trophies. Romeo Crennel, Lamar Leachman, John Fox, Pat Flaherty, Fred Hoagland, Sean Payton. I mean, the level of that's all, Parcells and Coughlin, they are great head coaches, and they were willing to, make the calls when they had to and run their team the way they had to, but they certainly also knew how to surround themselves.
Yeah, and there's one more in there.
Romeo, did I say Romeo?
Said Romeo, but another guy who was so very damn good was Al Groh. And I think he's the best teacher of linebackers this game has ever seen. I mean, he wasn't afraid to coach anybody. He wasn't afraid to coach Lawrence. He would coach everybody, and he always brought something to your best players to make them even better. You know, he was just that guy. And another guy, which they can't do that anymore, is a guy who he'd stay till the sun came up the next morning. If you wanted to get better at something, he would stay as long as you needed to stay, and he'd work on whatever you need to work on. I mean, I can't say, you know, of all the great coaches that have been in my life and in the Giants history, Al Groh is on my Mount Rushmore.
Good. Then we're going to do something on him too. And I'm
Yeah.
going to interview you during the course of the season when we do something on Giant assistant coaches.
Okay. I'm in for that.
Well, how about this though? And here again is like the cool tie, because his son, Mike, is the Giants wide receivers coach.
Yeah, there you go.
So you got that tie-in. So the other thing so the podcast on giants.com and everything, that starts on July the 9th. And we count down the top 100 players. And then this FanFest that will culminate kickoff weekend when the Giants take on the Vikings, the top 10 and other players will be honored before and at halftime. But the FanFest that they're having on Friday night, free FanFest at MetLife Stadium.
That's the Friday before the opening game.
Yes. Friday, September the 6th. So the top 100 players in the history of the franchise have been invited, including family members of the deceased, because there's a lot of guys that have passed away. That evening is going to be epic.
Yeah, I mean, listen, man, there are a lot of things that this organization has gotten right, and that is this FanFest and just what we just witnessed with the Madison Square Garden thing is just really showing fans exactly how the organization feels about you. And this FanFest is going to be another example of that. Just, you know, not just the access, but the way the shows are run. And hats off to our boss, Don Sperling, who's big influence on all of those things. But it's just been, I mean, I'm a former player, but I'm also a fan. And I look at this and I say, boy, this is first class. Like, and listen, man, this is also why it's so cool to be a winner in New York. You just had a freaking celebration in Madison Square Garden, and the place was packed. And it's like, where else? You can't do those things anywhere else. Like it is just such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, Don, a lot of these halftime ceremonies and all these special events, Don Sperling and Christine Beluyo, they just know how to run a show, and they know how to organize it, and working with them on the scripts as far as how we're going to do this. And of course, Nilay Shah, who has he's been working on this for 2 years, you know, with the logo and all this stuff.
And he is so meticulous, Nilay, because I'm working with him on, you know, this project and a few other. And when you talk about the attention to detail, the phone calls, the text messages, the updates, he's just, I mean, it's a great crew. But I remember when Nilay first came to the Giants, he was just, you know, a young pup trying to, you know, figure out the website business and get the Giants website up to speed. And now he has really grown into just an incredible, and he's under 40 years old, and just incredible at what he does in terms of all of these different touch points of how the Giants are presented to the public.
Yeah, and he really, I mean, from just what was going to go in the lobby to all these things, these events that we're going to have during the course of the season, starting with top 100 seasons night with Giant legends. And then, you know, Don brought over from the NBA, his storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And he always tells the story when he started working at the NBA. David Stern said, "You have an unlimited budget. I want you to interview anybody who's alive, and we got to chronicle the league." And since Don came to the Giants, I mean, you think about all the interviews that we've done, and all the shows capturing Giants history. And I think he was the last one to interview Frank Gifford, and in a substantive interview, and
Wow.
Andy Robustelli, and all those Giants Chronicles shows that we've been doing for 15 years. I remember sitting there interviewing Alex Webster. He was old and frail, but couldn't have been nicer. Y.A. Tittle. We have all this inventory, and we keep adding to it. And Don is basically, from a video standpoint, preserved the history of the Giants, and we've got everybody to tell every story from any era, basically.
That's great. And can I shameless plug here?
Yeah.
During the course of the season, as you guys unveil this, again, working with Nilay Shah, we're going to do some of that same storytelling through apparel. Like,
Really?
just really cool t-shirts.
Starter?
It's starter. But you'll see some really cool images. I have, I should show this one. I think they would love it.
All right, Carl. So what is one of the cool items?
So we're going to kick it off with this one. So this is one, the Duke. This is the famous Wellington Mara fishing hat, but we started off with, this piece, and there'll be some stories told around that, and we'll get some of the family members to talk about it. And I've, had a top opportunity to speak with Susan McDonald and Frank, and I used to give him the memories of how every practice, whether it was raining or snowing, and now the Giants didn't have a practice facility, an indoor bubble. Wellington Mara would be out at every practice on the coldest days in his trench coat, in that fisherman hat. And that was just kind of like the symbol of, what Giants football was about, that he was there with the team. And, and again, you guys on the show, there was a lot of talk about Wellington Mara and, winning those games when he was sick, and showing the world what it meant to have an owner like Wellington. But like, we're creating almost like a coffee table book of images around Giants football and really cool moments. We have like original tickets, and these are more collector's items.
So what ticket is that from?
So that t-shirt was the opening of Giants Stadium, the original ticket, but we're just going through great images and great moments and just storytelling. Some of it's meant to be worn, but we're really creating like a coffee table book of moments and images in Giants history that are wearable experiences, if you will.
Yeah, because they're going to have a coffee table book
Yeah.
with the great moments and great players. So now you can kind of wear some of that stuff.
Yes, exactly.
So it just kind of in wrapping up, I spent a bunch of time with Jeff Sluman, who is a former PGA championship winner and phenomenal player on the PGA Tour and PGA Tour champions. And we were talking about this event that had just happened. And Jeff grew up in Rochester, but spent most of his, life in Chicago, Bears fan.
Mm-hmm.
And I was showing him some of the pictures and videos that I had taken from last Thursday night. And he's like, man, he goes, that is unbelievable. He goes, we couldn't do that. And I'm like, what do you mean? I said, the Bears, the Hallis family, the monsters of the Midway,
Mm-hmm.
they've played over 100 years. But then it was like, he's like, yeah, but 90% of them are dead. He said, really, all we have to hang on is the 85 Bears that won the one championship.
Wow.
But he said, a lot of our history goes back to the earlier days of the NFL, and he goes, I'm not sure that there's enough people alive that could fill this out the way you guys did, because you guys have, because that's unbelievable.
Wow.
And I thought about it. I'm like, he said, yeah, probably the Packers could do it. The Packers could definitely do it.
Yeah, they have their own Hall of Fame right at their stadium. Yeah.
But he said, you know what, other for current fans, other than the 85 Bears, who's around to celebrate the 63 championship team or all those ones in the 30s? Because you Giant fans are lucky that there's that many people alive that span all those eras.
Yeah.
So, do you got anything else to share?
Well, no, we are going to obviously pick the pace up a bit as training camp rolls around, and I've got some fun observations, coming out of the OTAs, and everybody's going, really crazy for Malik Neighbors, and you're hearing things from Kayvon Thibodeau about he wants to be a standard bearer like Lawrence Taylor in that sack category, and you got Brian Burns. But we'll get into that in another podcast sooner than later.
Yeah.
We're coming up on this, so I think we should finish up our vacations and get back in it, man.
There you go. So Hard Knocks, July the 2nd. The release of the top 100 players, 10 at a time, starting July the 9th with podcasts on the Giant social media platforms. And yeah, we'll get into the football stuff when the football stuff is actually happening, because right now everybody's on vacation.
Yeah, exactly.
How do we like to end it?
Tell a friend to tell a friend.
Believe in Giants.